Today's Tuesday, March the 1st, 2022. I call this meeting to order, the Curriculum Committee meeting. 2.1, review and discussion of the memorandum of understanding between San Mateo CISD and the Texas State Technical College dual enrollment courses for the 2022-2023 school year.
Good afternoon, Board President, Board members. This is our yearly MOU with TSTC. These are classes, and they're the last page of the MOU. You will see the classes that we are offering at San Mateo High School. It says off-site because it's not at TSTC, it's in our high school. And those are tied into our CTE pathways. So this is a yearly MOU. Our students have done very well with these classes. Mr. Weller has the MOU so he can review to make sure all looks good. If there's additional questions, Mr. Rosa is also here to answer any additional questions.
Questions, board members?
So I just have you mentioned, looking at that last page, so we have only 4 courses, is that correct?
That is correct, and we are exploring with TSC, I believe, to see if there's any additional classes that we could offer. Mr. Rosa, do you want to expand on that?
Thank you, Mr. Rosa.
Good evening, everybody. Basically, this allows us, well, of course, it's a dual enrollment. Only reason we have just education, we're going to try to get something going with TSC on some of the other areas, construction, welding, some of the technology courses. We haven't been able to do that with TSTC because the way our schedule is set up in a block, TSTC is requiring for 2 courses to be taken. That would take our students away for half a day. Most of our students don't have a half a day to go. So education one was one that we were able to work through because we have a teacher in-house. And that helps. That helps to have Ms. Dori de la Fuente that takes care of that one. So that's why you only see one. And it's 4 courses, but she teaches all 4 courses. Okay, and we're looking at about 70, 75 kids that go through that program. Yes.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Rosa.
Appreciate that, thank you.
Any more questions, board members? Okay, agenda item. Item 2.2, review and discussion of the memorandum of understanding service referral agreement between San Mateo CISD and Rice Recovery.
I will ask Mr. Adisuris and Mr. Madriquez to come up and report on this. This is a new MOU for our district.
Good evening, board members. I'm not exactly sure what questions you may have, but basically, Project RISE has been around for about 45 years. As a matter of fact, when I was a young counselor, they were known as PADAP. So Ms. Lopez, you may be familiar with that because that's the Palmer Drug Abuse Program. So approximately 3 years ago, I took a group of counselors from the elementary, middle, and high school, and myself, and we went to San Antonio for the conference on substance abuse. One of the things that, I noticed, we're aware that we don't have a focused substance abuse prevention intervention program for the district. And that was actually back in '97 when I first became a school counselor, my very first assignment. So we dialogued about what is it that we could do because some of the same companies were providing the same curriculums and programs. Hazelden, for example. And so when we came back, I know that I was in conversations with different programs, outpatient programs and inpatient programs, but they were like in Corpus and San Antonio, and I was trying to get them to understand the need here in the Valley, and maybe hopefully some of them may see the opportunity and they could come on board. Well, it had been 3 years and nothing. And so luckily, because of a grant through the UT Health Service System, Project RISE, which was rebranded in 2008, I believe, from Palmer Drug Abuse Program, they're able to reach out to, I believe, 11 counties and the counties in South Texas. And at this point in time, it is a telehealth substance abuse recovery program where they can work with 11 to 17-year-olds, and not only the child, but their families as well. And so that doesn't necessarily mean that the child has been identified as using some particular substance. But as we all know, society really hasn't changed a whole lot. There are all kinds of problems that are out there. If we had the answer, we would have fixed them by now, from teen pregnancy to truancy to substance abuse. And so sometimes we do have our kids that end up taking something they're not supposed to, listening to someone they're not supposed to. And as a campus administrator, I remember accompanying some of these kids to the hospital and waiting for their parents to get there because they took something they weren't supposed to. And so obviously that would be a very good example of a referral that can be made. Now, it could be a self-referral, it could be maybe a referral that a teacher makes, but in this case, as in speaking with Mr. Marquez, we talked about how one of the responsibilities under the MOU that RISE would be to offer a platform for that referral. So they do have a link that would be made available so that we can refer a student or a family member. And so you can imagine if that link was pretty much available to everybody. Wow, what would that look like? So we talked a little bit about how if there's a concern among an administrator, teacher, counselor, librarian, whoever it might be, support staff, they can go through the counselor, and then the counselor can talk to that child. Because just because we have a resource that we're hopefully going to get on board doesn't mean that we're absolving ourselves from having that relationship building opportunity with a child and letting them know that somebody there at that campus cares about them, that a lot of people care about them. And sometimes that's what they need to hear. And so regardless, we talked about how the counselor would be the one probably to make those referrals as needed. And so it's pretty straightforward if you look at the responsibilities, providing a platform for hosting the network. I don't know if you have the MOU in front of you all, board members. Thank you. And providing client referrals for services when appropriate, and they would provide disciplinary and other referral history records once they have a release from the parent so that we know how they're doing and what's going on with them. And then services provided by them are at no cost. So this is basically a no-brainer where it's like, hey, they're providing something that we need, it's not costing us anything, and finally we have somebody in the area that can provide that support that they need. On our end, if you look at the bottom of page 1, our responsibilities would be to provide them with updated information in the organizational scheme of the district. The second would be to accept referrals from them if they were to call us and say, hey, there also, besides the substance abuse issue that's happening with the father that's affecting this child, they say that sometimes they don't have enough to eat. And so we know that we have some resources in the community that we can reach out to and try and provide those for those additional needs. If you look at the next item on the second page, we can provide disciplinary and other applicable referral history as long as we have a referral from a parent. And I think that's one of sometimes the things that is lacking, that the organization, be it Tropical or be it South Texas Behavioral, what have you, they want to release from us or from the parent so that we can get them records. But I think it's a good practice to say, hey, why don't you have the parent sign a release on that end so that we also know how we might be able to help and what's going on with the child or the family. And lastly, that services provided by the partner under this MOU, again, they want to reiterate that it's at no cost. Now, I'm sure that you all probably want to know the who, what, where, when, and why. And so this is the who, what, where, when, and why, so that when you all get a chance, you can't sleep at night, because I know that the budget keeps us up. You all can take a look at this, and if you were to have any questions, yes, sir. Mr. Rodriguez, myself, would be happy to answer any questions. Mr. Rodriguez, at this point, I don't know whether maybe you want to elaborate a little bit.
No, I think you, first of all, good evening. So I think Mr. Isuris kind of explained the process of the MOU and the services. So I don't know if you have any questions for myself or Mr. Isuris that we can answer at this time.
So because there's no cost related to this service, this would have nothing to do with SHARs or anything like that, correct?
No, and what's interesting is that these people are recovery specialists, and they have to have so many courses, I believe 46 hours of coursework, then they have to take an additional 20 hours every 2 years to continue with their certification. And what's interesting that I found is unlike an LCDC, and that's a licensed chemical dependency counselor, okay? These people can go out and charge for the telehealth, where an LCDC cannot. So that was pretty interesting.
I noticed it says who we serve, the youth ages 12 to 17 and family members, including parents, siblings, and loved ones. That's very good.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's-
The whole point is it could be that the child's not the one that's having the substance abuse issues, but the example I gave earlier about how the dad, or maybe a cousin or somebody, but also the fact that if it is the child, they insist on having a family member, a parent, attend the virtual support groups, the peer groups that they have. They also, if you notice, when you read through the information that I gave you, it tells you what other services they provide. Like they provide social activities for the kids. Well, right now, because of the situation that we're in, believe it or not, they have social activities that are online. And so eventually, and you notice that they put me down as a contact, whether it's me or someone else, that was their doing. What they did was basically present to me. And once I said, looks like a real good resource, I had them present to all of our counselors at our monthly counselors meeting, because I wanted their input. And I'm here to let you know that every single one of them said that they agree that this is needed and that they would love to see something like this for our students and our families. Okay?
We've never, this will be the first time it comes to this district.
As far as I know, ma'am, yes. I've been here 5, 6, 7 years, something like that. And as a matter of fact, besides Brownsville, and Brownsville is where I started off in '84, and then in '87 became a school counselor with a drug prevention intervention program. They had a team, or we were a team, I believe of 6 counselors at the time, that covered 30-some campuses. And we did classroom presentations on substance abuse awareness. We did awareness sessions for parents. And then we got to the difficult things. We actually did intervention where we did group counseling and individual counseling with kids. So we had to do an assessment. And basically the kid would have to disclose to us, well, yeah, last week I did this, or last night I did that. And then we had to, of course, talk to the parent because, obviously they're minors and it's a self-harm issue. And so once we let the parents know what was going on and what we could provide, we would provide the services there in-house. We would then also send them and their families to PADAP, Palmer Drug Abuse Program back then, to get the additional support from someone in the community.
Notice here, you have different meetings, a younger group, family group, educational group classes. Those are good times in the evening, right?
Absolutely, yes. And I think that that's one of the things that Palmer's continue to do. I know that, again, back in the day, it wasn't that they were interrupting instructional time.
Right,
Now,
right.
understand, of course, that if there's a child in crisis, my hope is that they go to their counselor or their administrator, and if the child's saying, I really need to talk to Eddie, he's my peer support counselor with Project Rise, that we go ahead and we reach out and we do that, because when they're in crisis or something's going on, they don't care. When their affective is being, looked at, and the cognitive, that can wait.
So I understand that this is no cost to the district, which is great, but what about the cost to the individual?
No cost to the family, no cost to the district.
So even if they're referred to, they're not gonna charge insurance or anything like that, it's just?
Well, let me rephrase that. I did mention to you that I found out today, actually, that their counselors, unlike LCDCs, could charge, like Medicaid or Medicare or whatever it might be. But if the family or the person does not have any type of place, they're gonna get those services at no charge.
Mr. DeSutis, and this would be for middle school and high school kids?
This would be for, I believe it's 11 to 17 years of age, 12 to 17.
Okay.
However, keep in mind that, let's assume that maybe we have somebody that's 18 or 19, and we realize that they're having this problem. The one thing that I would do is I would call the child in, I would talk to them, and if there's another family member in the household, like maybe they have a younger sibling, okay, then they can work on with the family based on the fact that there's a 12 to 17-year-old in their family.
Now, is this something that they can refer themselves, because a lot of times I think they're not gonna wanna tell anybody that they have a drug addiction. Some will, some won't, right?
Yeah,
But
yes.
is that available to them so that maybe on their website or something for them to say, you know what, I need therapy, let me reach out to someone?
Yeah, absolutely. As long as we make the information available, we make them aware. I can tell you that we had to kind of be, not that we were being tricky about it, but in our assessments back in the day, we never asked, oh, so do you use X, Y, and Z? What we would ask, of course, tell me a little bit about yourself. How many brothers and sisters do you have? What school did you go to in middle school? Stuff like that. And then eventually we would ask a question like, so tell me, when was the last time that you had a drink or that you had something to smoke that you shouldn't have? So right there, the kid's assuming that we already know. So normally they'll say, well, it was last week, sir. You see what I'm saying? And then at the very end of the whole thing, because we don't want to jump on it right there, at the very end is where we say, hey, mijo, look, I need to be honest with you. Remember at the very beginning, I mentioned to you that all this is confidential unless someone's being hurt.
Right.
Now, what you're doing right now is actually hurting you, and it could be even worse. So I just need to let you know, look, we're going to need to talk to one of your parents or both of your parents, but I'll be there with you if you want me to.
So that's what I was gonna ask. Before you do refer them, you contact the parents, right? You-
Absolutely.
Okay, great.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because you had just mentioned of referring them, but you had never said anything about contacting the parent.
Yeah, no, the
Especially because they're
parent-
minors.
Yeah, the parent involvement's gonna be there, and if you recall, I mentioned that we would have to have releases, and from both organizations,
From both
obviously,
entities,
that would entail the parent at that point in time.
Is this available to the alternative centers also?
Yes, it is.
Like,
It's to all our schools,
PRC,
and by the way,
Gateway.
when they first contacted me, one of my first questions was, would we be the first? Now, they're serving schools up like Harlandale, they just got Cypress Fairbanks last week. And so, but here in the valley, they're doing the juvenile center, okay? But we would be the first public school, and I said, great, because in San Benito, we lead, we don't follow. So they said, oh, man, I'm glad to hear that.
When will they come on board?
Oh, I mean, as soon as you all decide that
Okay.
this is a good thing,
Okay.
immediately. And regarding termination,
Okay.
if you look at the verbiage, and of course, I'm sure the attorney's gonna review and all of that, but it mentions that any party can give the other party 30-day notice. A notice at any time of termination, and that would become effective 30 days after the notice is provided.
Okay. One of
Okay.
the biggest things that's happening right now, my first year as a counselor, I started with PRC. And back then, the biggest drug that was used was marijuana. And now with all the drugs coming in through the border, one of the things that's happening is our kids are getting their hands on meth and fentanyl, which are very deadly.
Absolutely.
Very dangerous to our kids. So I am very happy that you are looking into bringing this program to our kids.
Well,
because
all the counselors,
Right.
luckily, we have the support of our
Right.
superintendent, our assistant superintendents, that they allow that once a month, without fail, we meet. And so
Right.
like tomorrow, we're meeting. And so we have 3 presentations. And we have 3 different people that have things that I've seen from them that I think would be a great thing. And then I've gotten a small committee, like of 2 or 3 counselors, to go through the presentation next. And then if they tell me, yeah, Mr. E, this is good, then okay, you're gonna be able to do this with everybody, and then I get that feedback. So we have some other things even on the non-affective side of the house. Like one for tomorrow is specifically for the high school counselors, where there's a program. When I was an academic counselor, we would have to audit transcripts and credits, and when you were the senior counselor, it's like, oh my God, I better get this right. So I would review it, and then I would pass it on to my buddy, and he or she would review it to make sure that our kids were gonna graduate, that they had what they needed. Well, there's some software now, and now it's even harder. It's more complicated because of the pathways and the endorsements and all of these other things that Senate Bill 5 brought into the House. It was easier when I was back there, and even then it was hard. But what happens is that, and Mr. Corona, I appreciate the laughing because, man, it gets that way where you're all stressed and you can't do anything else but kind of laugh about it. But what happens is that this software will actually audit all the courses they're taking, how they're progressing, and also the pathways to make sure that they will end up with that endorsement. And it does it on a nightly basis by integrating itself through Skyward. And so that's the other pair of eyes. And so the big question will be, well, how much might that cost? And maybe there's, maybe it might be something that we might be able to do, because I'll tell you what, if we can help employees, we are directly or indirectly helping our students. Because that 80-20, where the counselor needs to spend the 80% of their time implementing the comprehensive guidance program, that's what we can do. In lieu of hiring, or we can't get more counselors or what have you, Give them the tools to help them work smarter and not harder. So thank you guys for your support. Thank you all administrators for your support. If there's anything we can answer for you, please let us know.
Thank you,
Thank you,
sir,
Mr.
and
Jesus.
thank you to all the team as
Thank
well, and everybody that's involved in
Absolutely.
doing this and providing services to our students.
Yes,
Thank you, Dr. Cruz.
I also had a question. So, you said this is ages 12 to 17, right?
Yes,
So
ma'am.
this is going to be more towards our middle school and high school, our
Absolutely.
secondary campuses. But like you mentioned earlier, that is a good thing, your example with the 19-year-old, but also our elementary students that
I'm
might
glad you
have
brought that up.
older siblings. Those elementary counselors will also, what's the training like?
Yeah, well, and the thing, it's not so much the training, but let me tell you, I'm glad you brought that up, and the reason I said that, and all of our counselors at every grade level are awesome. But I gotta tell you that those elementary counselors, rock and roll. Man, those guys do the classroom presentations on, suicide or self-harm behaviors, on anxiety, on stress, on substance abuse, on anything you can think of. And then they do their group counseling sessions, and they have the time for the individual. It just lends itself a little bit more. And so obviously what's gonna happen is, if you all approve this, then I can ask Jamie Brandt with the program, hey, we'd like for you to do more than just the orientation for our counselors. What can we do to tell them this is what it's gonna look like so that everybody knows? But I wanna let you know that if you remember the Just Say No? Well, man, I'm dating myself, but I was with Just Say No. And eventually, Kika Camarena, was killed, and it became Red Ribbon, okay? But it was Just Say No because Nancy Reagan was asked by a kid one time, well, what do we do? And she said, well, just say no. And that's how Just Say No came. And so basically, at the elementaries, I just want to reassure you guys, that's where the battle's going to be won. The prevention we do minimizes the intervention that we end up doing at middle schools and at the high school. So we got to put a lot of our eggs in that basket and give those kids the resiliency skills that they need the refusal skills that they need, so that when they end up in that situation, they can say, hey, man, I'm better than that. I don't need that. Okay?
So all of the district counselors will be trained in this program? or
Well,
will
and
be-
yes, they will be, and I want to make sure that we understand train and how we define that. If there's a specific curriculum that they would be implementing, then we would want to make sure that they get the information and that they can deliver the skills necessary to implement. But since this is basically a program that's going to be provided by them, the training that we would get would be being aware of what they're doing, being aware that they have peer support groups, being aware that their counselors have to have those 46 hours and in what areas. In other words, let's get more into detail about what you all are and what you do, because they spent 45 minutes with us on Zoom when they did the orientation, because I wanted to get feedback from them, okay? So I just want to make sure that that's how we would define training in this case.
Thank you so much, Mr. Isuris, Mr. Marquez.
Welcome, sir.
Hats off to you. This is a great program for the community, and thank you. Appreciate
Well,
it.
appreciate you guys too. Thank you all.
Any questions, board members? Okay, committee concerns? Okay, meeting adjourned 6:35.